Hey fellow gliders, welcome back. Today we are going to challenge ourselves a little bit to see if glide tables and all of the things that come along with the data editor in Glide can go toe-to-toe with Google spreadsheet formulas. If you've been around Glide for quite a while, you know that Glide got its start by building apps on top of Google spreadsheets. Also, when Glide was just getting started, there wasn't a whole lot of rich features that Glide has now. So in order to make certain functionality happen, we had to rely on Google Sheet formulas. However, Glide has improved so much that we can actually start stripping back all of those formulas that we had once created and rely simply on native Glide data editor features and columns. We're going to take a look at which columns can replace which formulas and challenge ourselves to see how many we can replace by the end of this video. Yes, I do have to admit that sometimes writing a simple Google Sheet formula can be more efficient than creating maybe a combination of columns that's required on Glide's side. However, the biggest drawback to using Google Sheet formulas is that they won't tell Glide that something's been updated in the sheet. Meaning, if you have any formulas that are just recalculating something or providing a new subset of data using a VLOOKUP or a query, that doesn't automatically tell the Glide app that there is new data to look at. So you have to wait and wait for your Glide app to sync with your Google spreadsheet in order for that data to appear as new interface information in the Glide app. So leveraging Glide's native data tables with their built-in computed columns is much more efficient when it comes to displaying new data in your app. So let's go ahead and take a look at all the popular formulas in Google Sheets and see if we can make that happen in Glide's native data editor. Let's go. All right, on the left-hand side here, you see I have maybe the top 14 formulas that exist in Google Sheets. On the right-hand side, I'm going to create a new project in Glide. Let's start with a Glide page and Glide tables. We're going to nix Google Sheets out of the equation altogether, create a new project, and let's see what we end up with. We should have some sample data to play with, but as this video progresses, we might add some data in here just to show you how different things can work. All right, I'm going to head over to the data editor because this is where we're going to live for this video. Let's make things a little bit smaller so we can see all of our data here. All right, formula number one, the VLOOKUP formula. So VLOOKUP basically just means, hey, look at this key and look at this array or look at this table and find matching information and bring in some other information that relates to the key. So Glide does this through relation columns. So if I have this category here, blocks, and I want to bring in some information about blocks from a different table, instead of doing a VLOOKUP on this information, I create a relation column to the information. All right, so let's go ahead and create that relation column. New type is going to be in this computed section, relation. And the relation, what we're going to match is we're going to find the category, that's our key value, and we're going to find the matching value in a different table. So we're going to look into the categories table and find that matching information, which is the category name. And we see that it found a match. All right. Now in Glide, this is just a representation of the match, of the bridge between the two tables. If you actually wanted to bring in other information, we have to use a follow-up column here as the lookup column. So we can say this is the category image maybe. Right? So the value I'm looking up is going to be through that relation, and we can search for the image. All right? So in Google Sheets, you only need the one formula to bring in that value. In Glide, you need two. You need the relation and the lookup. All right, formula number two is the mighty if formula. So in Google Sheets, you first are looking at a condition, and then it's going to result in a value if it's true or a value if it's false. So it's this kind of binary thing, right? In Glide, we use a computed column, and we use the if, then, else. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the plus, search for if. Type should be an if, then, else column. And then here we define our condition, right? So we can say if, and then our condition, maybe it's a number of stock. And then if it's true, well, whatever this value is, all right? So in this case, if it equals something or if it's less than something or something like that, right? Based upon what type of column you're looking at here, you'll get a different information here, right? So if you're looking at a number column, then these are conditions related to numbers. If you're looking at text, it has conditions related to text and so forth. So we can take a look at our stock here. Maybe we can say something like, hey, if our stock is less than or equal to 20, then we need to reorder our stock. right? Otherwise, we have it in stock. Something like that, right? Now, in Google Sheets, if you wanted to have a nested condition, you'd have to keep adding on to your if then else. Here, all we have to do is add a new case. Now, the only thing that's different here is that with Glide, all of these conditions are OR conditions. So you have to structure them in such a way that you're going to take a look at the sequence of your conditions. So maybe we're going to take a look at, hey, if our stock is less than 100, then it's in this other status called depleting or something. I don't know. So we can say something, hey, if stock is less than 100, then depleting. Right? And we can see here that we have now 3 different statuses: in stock, depleting, and reorder. Right? However, the order here matters. If I put stock here first, right, if it's depleting, you'll see that no longer do we have a reorder result, because anything that's less than 100, including this less than or equal to 20, is going to make this first condition match. So you really have to pay attention to the order of your if-then-else sequence in order to get the information that you're looking for. All right, formula number 3 is the if-error formula. In Google Sheets, if you were to wrap a formula within the if-error, then it's going to result in that original formula unless the result is an error, and then it gives you the option to reply with a different response. In Glide, they don't present us with information that something results in an error. Instead, the field will just be blank. For example, if I take the stock here and I divide it by 0, in a Google Sheet, that would result in an error. In Glide, it just results in a blank. So what we'd have to do here is use an if-then-else formula that says, hey, if this is blank, then do something else, right? So we could say something like, hey, if the stock divided by 0, right, is empty, meaning it's an error, then error or do something, right? Otherwise, do something else or pick something else, like the original value or something like that. Formula number 4, the split text. So Glide does allow you to split. It's a little bit different than the split formula in Google Sheets. In Google Sheets, what you do is you take a singular cell and you can use the split formula to divide it into 2 different columns. For example, full name has a space in between, and you can split this column by that space, which results in 2 new columns of first and last. Glide doesn't allow you to split information into multiple columns. You can't create columns in Glide tables dynamically like you can in Google Sheets. However, we can still do something like this in Glide tables. Let me show you how. So in my user sheet, I have a full name column, but maybe I want 2 new columns based off of this column, one for first name, one for last name, and I want those 2 columns to be created dynamically. So what we have to do is actually split this column and then grab each value from the split into their own columns. So in Google Sheets, the result is 3 total columns. In Glide, it's 4. Let me show you how. So I'm going to first create a split text column. We'll say split name, and the type is a split text column, and we're going to point our split text column to the name field. Our delineator is going to be a space. All right? So now you can see that the name has been split. Really, this column now is an array of 2 values. So because it's an array, we can pick out each value in the array based upon the index of the array. We can pull out that information using a single value column. So I'm going to say first name. I'm going to use a single value column. And I'm going to get the first item in the array, and the array is my split name. And we can see now we have just the first item. Okay? If I were to duplicate this, I can say last name, and I'm going to get the last item in the array, which is the second one. All right, so now I have first name and last name from the full name column, and it's created dynamically, just like the split formula in Google Sheets. All right, formula number 5 is the COUNTIF formula. This lets you specify or arrange and then count how many times a certain value exists within that range. Glide is something similar, but first you have to do the if, and then you have to do the count. There is no total, just COUNTIF. So what we have to do is first define the if. What is that condition? Maybe we're counting how many times the word blocks appears in this category column. So the first thing I have to do is create that if. So I'm going to say if block. It's going to be an if then else column. And I'll say if category is, or maybe includes the word block, then, and we can give it a number here, 1, right? Or if you want to, you can just result in anything. I could say maybe just the category itself. And then what we're going to do is we're going to count up how many times this happens. This will be 2 in this case. And now all we have to do is add a roll-up column to count how many times the word blocks appears. In this case, how many times anything appears, because we already know it's just going to result in the word blocks. Really what you have to figure out though is where do you want that number to exist? Ultimately, you're probably trying to either use that number for some other calculation, or you're trying to display it somewhere on the front end of your Glide app. So really kind of pay attention to where you want that number to be, and that's the table you're going to use in order to do your count. So maybe I want that number of blocks in my users sheet for whatever reason. All right, so all I have to do is create the roll-up column in this users table. We'll say count blocks, and it's going to be a roll-up column, and we're going to roll up from the category or from the thing sheet the if block. And we can see that we can just going to do a simple count. And we see the result is 2. Now, the only thing that this solution can't do is specify the range for this rollup. So you, again, have to be a little bit more creative in that first initial if then else. So let's say you only want to count the blocks in a range of a certain date. So let's go ahead and add a date column in here. I'm going to add a column to the right. We'll say date. This will be a date time column, right? And let's add in some quick dates here from months ago until today. All right, so I added a couple quick columns here, just the dates, and then a singular date of 2 months ago. And maybe our range is all values that are within 2 months, right? So that would rule out these 2 dates, which means that ultimately this blocks shouldn't exist, right? So all we have to do is then add on that condition to the if then else. So the first thing we should check is that range. So I'm going to add a case, and we're going to say if the date is on or before that 2 months ago, we're going to result in a blank. And that's going to be the very first condition we check. So now we see that that blocks went away, which then means that our COUNTIF in our user sheet results in 1. So again, with a COUNTIF, you have to create your condition first, and then you can calculate after that. Formula number 6, the array formula. This one is a huge formula in Google Sheets, and it was one of the only ways we were able to create these dynamic apps using Glide. However, Glide has now created several ways to do an array formula replacement. So the first thing you need to know in array formula is just copies a formula down. And usually what we're trying to do here is you're trying to copy either some templated text down a ways or a calculation down the ways. And Glide lets you do that just using either a template column or a math column simply, right? So let's say we wanted to create a calculation, right? We wanted to have all of these stock plus 50, right? In Google Sheets, we have to use an array formula that would look at the stock column and add 50 to it, right? In Glide, all we need is a math column. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a new math column. Let's call this stock plus 50. And all we're going to do is just add 50 to the stock. So we'll say stock plus 50. And it's as though we had created an array formula of adding 50 to every single value in the stock column. No formula is required, right? The array formula also lets you maybe add in some dynamic text. You don't need an array formula for that either. You can just use a template column. So I'm going to add a template column here, and we're going to say stock colon and then a number. And then that number sign can be replaced with the stock. Right? So we don't need an array formula to add the word stock in there. We just use a template column and away we go. Formula number 7 is the length formula, L-E-N in Google Sheets. So in order to do this, all we need to do is split a column by nothing and then use a roll-up column to count. So I'm going to go ahead and count how many characters are in the names of these items. I'm going to add a column to the right here, and I'm going to say split name. And I'm going to look for a split text column. I'm going to split the name, but instead of splitting by a delineator, I'm just going to delete anything. And we see now that all of our words have been broken out into their own characters. Okay, from here I can add a roll-up column and say count length, roll up, and I'm going to count the split name. And this gives us the number of characters in that cell. Now, the only place that this breaks down is if you have spaces. So if I have like opus opus with a space in between, it's going to say this as 8 and not as 9 because it's not counting that space. Formula number 8 is the sort formula. I'm letting you know right now, sort doesn't really exist in the Glide data editor except for the ability to sort an array. And there's some trickery you can do there. I created a video about how to use some Glide computed columns in order to create rankings based upon points in a certain column. If you're interested in that video, go ahead and take a look right over here. But otherwise, in Glide, really you're ultimately after just trying to sort a list based on a value. And in this case, you don't need to do anything in the data editor. You would just do that on the front end. So if I were to come back over here, take a look at this list of things, I'll put it in a list here, and let's display the stock at the top here. You can sort this list by the stock just through the options section. So I can do options, and I'm going to say sort by the stock, either from ascending or descending. And that kind of gives us the same effect. Formula number 9 is the import range formula. Glide does not have an import range formula. This lets you bring in data from a completely different spreadsheet into the existing spreadsheet. Glide does let you connect different data points here. So it is possible that you can bring in another subset of data. You could also do some trickery things with like working tables in order to convert an array of items into its own table. But the concept of an import range just doesn't really exist in Glide table, so we're just going to move on. Formula number 10 is the unique formula. This one also doesn't really exist in Glide. Ultimately, what we're trying to do here is take a list of values, in this case, maybe these categories, and result in a list of unique categories like this, but do so dynamically. There is kind of a way we can do this with working tables. Let me show you the trick. So the first thing here is that if I didn't have a category sheet whatsoever, right? What I do is I use my users sheet or some other table in order to look up the array of existing categories. So in my things sheet, I'm going to take a look at all of these categories here, right? And I'm going to do a lookup on those. I'm going to say lookup all categories, and this will be just a lookup column. I'm going to look up the things, categories, and we see here we're going to get a list of everything, and it's going to be repeating. Afterwards, I'm going to use the unique array column. So in Glide, I can do other, array, and then this is the unique elements. I'm going to point it to our lookup all categories, and I'm going to say unique categories. And this should just result in the 3 unique categories. All right, now that I have these 3 unique categories, I can create a working table. And in that working table, I'm going to grab what I think will be as many categories that might be possible. So I'm going to say unique categories here in a new table. Right? I'm going to go ahead and create as many rows as I think might exist for the amount of categories. This could be maybe 50 rows if you think there might be 50 categories, or 100 rows if you think it's 100 categories. I'll say 30 for now. Okay, afterwards, we're going to add in a row ID. Okay, next, we're going to create an index dynamically. First thing we have to do is look up row IDs. So we're going to say all row IDs. And this is going to be a lookup of all of the row IDs in this table. So now it's an array of the row IDs. And we're going to get the index. So the index, I'm going to look up index. This is the find element index. Values are going to be the row IDs, and I'm going to find the row ID. And now I have this dynamic index of 0 through as many columns as I have, right? Or rows that I have. Okay, next I'm going to bring in my unique array of categories. So I'm going to say unique array. This will be a single value. And I'm going to look up from the thing sheet my unique categories. In this case, we have those 3 values, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then afterwards, we're going to go ahead and result in the category using a single value column. So this is the category name. It'll be a single value. And I'm going to get from the start, I'm actually going to select the index. And then I'm going to grab the unique array. And this results in blocks, clouds, and prisms. Those 3 values, each on their own row. just like I have here in the category sheet. Now, if you only have a couple of categories, it's just easier to create a new sheet and put in the unique categories here, obviously, but this is not dynamic. So every time I add a new category to my thing sheet, I have to come back here and add that category to the category sheet. Unlike this solution, which is dynamic, right? And if I were to add in a new value here, I'll just make something up and bring in a brand new category. All right. This category sheet doesn't have it, but this one does. Formula number 11 is the search formula. This lets you look within a specific cell across multiple rows to see if a certain value lives in that cell. And if so, it's going to output a specific value. In Glide, we can just use an if then else for this. So we're going to take a look at our thing sheet, and maybe we're interested in knowing which of these items were created in October. So we have some dates here, and again, we have 3 of them that were created in October. Now, in order to use search in Glide, the column that you're looking into has to be a text column. So it's not going to work for date, but we can convert a date into text using a template column. I do this all of the time in Glide. So I'm going to add a column to the right. I'm going to say date string, something like this. And I'm going to convert that date into a string using a template. I'll just put in any variable here. I'm going to replace that variable with the date. And so now we have a string version of this mathematical date. And now I can look within the date string. Let me show you the difference. So now I want to know which ones exist in October. This is going to be an if then else column. I'm going to say if October. And if I were to look within the date column, so if date includes October, we see that there's not an includes condition here. But if I were to look within the date string, now there is includes, right? So I can say includes October, right? Then we can output October, right? Otherwise result in nothing. And now we have the values that live in October. And I can use this column for filtering purposes or for displaying a tag or something like that. Formula number 12 is the today formula. This allows you to dynamically insert today's date. In Glide, we can do that with a math column. I'm going to go ahead and insert a new column. I'll call this today. Type will be a math column. And I'm going to type in any variable. Particularly, I write the word just now. And the replacement for now will be now. Now you see this also includes the time because it's true to a now formula, not really a today formula. So if you're just looking at it for display purposes, we can convert the display to reflect just the date and the format. So now it's just today, right? Now really though, behind the scenes, it still has the time. So if you're trying to do calculations on this date where you want the time stripped out, then you're going to have to do some mathematical calculations on today in order to strip out the time. Some ways you can do that is by taking now, and you can subtract how many hours there are in today, right? So I could say something like the hours of now divided by 24. Right, so now we see that the hour is all at 12. Okay, then I can say minus the minutes of now divided by 24 divided by 60. And now all of them should be at 12:00 something, and then there's seconds. And the last one here is subtract the seconds, minus seconds of now divided by 24, divided by 60, divided by 60, or divided by 360, right? And now that should be truly today's value at midnight. Formula number 13 is the concatenate formula. This lets you string certain cells together and then join them using a delineator, typically a comma. There's a few ways to do this in Glide, depending upon what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to string different columns together, so maybe you want the name, comma, the stock, comma, the date, you can do that in 2 different ways. One way is through a template column. So I'm going to say concatenate version 1, right? And you can use a template column. And I'm going to say like 1, 2, 3, right? And I'm going to add 3 replacements, 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to replace them with the name and the stock and the date, like that. And you can see for the most part, it's going to combine those 3 values and separate them by a comma. Okay, where this breaks down is if any of those cells don't have values. You see this very last row doesn't have a stock or a date, so I have this comma at the end. In Google Sheets, that wouldn't have happened. It would have just been the one value of Nomi, right? So the better version of this is actually to form an array of those values and then join them using a join column. Let me show you how to do that. So instead of using a template column here, I'm going to do a make array. So I'm going to say concat version 2 array. And this is going to be a make array column, right? And I'm still going to specify those 3 things, the name, the stock, and the date, okay? So we see that these are going to be the 3 items that I'm combining. And we see that for that last row, it only found the 1 value. And now I can join them together using a comma. So I'm going to go ahead and add I'm going to actually duplicate it to save the name. And this will be the join. This will be a join text, or sorry, join list. And the text that I'm going to join is that make array. And I'm going to separate it by a comma and a space just so you can see it. All right, so now I have the exact same effect, name, comma, stock, comma, month, right? But this very last value, right, only has the 1 value in it. All right, so that's how you can concatenate columns going across. If you want to concatenate rows going down, that's a join list. So maybe I want to concatenate all of these names together into a singular list. I can just hit add. I'm going to say all names, let's say, and say join list. And I'm going to join the thing's name. And now I have all of those names comma separated. And I can take this value and send it wherever I'd like. You can also do this through a relation. Right, so in my category sheet, I have this list of related things. I can use that same thing of saying join names. So I'll say join list, and I'm going to join through the relation, the names, comma separated. And now I have a comma separated list of that relation of the related things from the category to the thing sheet. All right, our last formula in this video is the SUMIF. Just like the COUNTIF we did earlier, we first need to create the condition and then we can add the formula on top of that. So previously what we did is we created an if to say, hey, if it is a block, right, then display in the word block. And then we wanted to count how many there were here, right, from the user sheet, and we counted how many times the word blocked appeared. We can do the same thing with sum, except that all we have to do is result in a number value rather than a text value. So if we're trying to sum how many times block appear, or maybe we're trying to sum all of the items within the block category, right, instead of resulting in the name block here, we can result in the value that we're trying to sum, in this case, the stock. Right, so we see 298 and 17. Our condition is block, and these are the values. And so now all we have to do is take a look at our if then else formula. Instead of counting how many times it appears, because we're pointing it to a number column now instead of just count, we can also sum. We could also average, find the min, find the range, and so forth. In this case, sum, right? And our sum should be a total number of items from that category. So hopefully you're able to see how we can start piecing together certain columns in Glide in order to take the place of Google formulas. If you are still in love with Excel formulas or Google formulas, Glide does provide you a way to write formulas directly within your Glide table, and that's through the use of the formula column. So under type, you can search for other, go to code, and then search for Excel formula. And here you can write out your formula just like you were in Google Sheets or Excel. And it gives you 5 different variables that you can replace 3 different column values. So let's say we were trying to recreate this template formula using the Excel formula column. I can add a column to the right here, add in that Excel formula column, and then type out my formula here. Only difference is you don't need the equal sign. So I could say stock and A1, and I'm going to replace A1 with the actual column value. And we see we have an identical version here. You see it did strip out the units, so I would have to add that in. Fine. I can just say and stock. Done. And now it's identical. All right, so that's it. If you have any questions at all about how you're able to maybe replace Google formulas with Glide computed columns, simply leave me a comment below. You can also reach out to me at Twitter at @rpetito. And as always, thanks for watching.